Today, I want to talk to you about three big shifts in news consumption that predate the current moment. So, we're not talking about AI necessarily, although we'll get to that, but we are talking about what our audience has been up to and how we can respond as an industry. First, I want to start off, though, and tell you a little bit about Google News. I'm sure you all know Google News, but I particularly think that this mission, our mission, to empower everyone to understand the world through access to high quality news from a variety of perspectives, is incredibly important and has become more important in a fragmented media landscape. In fact, this mission is why I work for Google. Before I joined Google 2 years ago, I spent 7 years at NPR, where I was very, very focused on our mission of meeting American news consumers and helping them understand the world around them. And so to find a team at Google that is focused on those same challenges, but at a global scale and with the resources of Google, was an incredible opportunity, and one I couldn't pass up. So I want to share with you some of the findings from our user researchers from around the globe, and some of the things we're thinking about, and I hope you all are thinking about in your news businesses as we go forward in the next several years. So, as we've talked about here, tech keeps changing. There's new things all the time. I will say, I work at Google. I see AI stuff coming faster and furiouser, and even those of us who work on it, around it, we're surprised by just how fast all this stuff is coming to market. But you know what? Our users are changing too, all the time. They're looking for new things, they're having new behaviors, and this is this cycle of tech influencing users, influencing tech, influencing users, that we have to keep responding to as a media industry. Now, this is something that all of you focus on. This is something we focus on too. This is one of Google's 10 things we know. Actually, the first one, focus on the user and all else will follow. So when we talk about knowing our users, it's really about listening to them. We've already heard today from several speakers about the importance of understanding our users' needs, their motivations, what drives them. So I'm going to tell you about three big shifts and how we can think about each of them as we're looking at the future of news. First, how people consume news has changed. You know, I'm sure none of this is going to be a surprise to you, but it's good to have numbers to it. The news is not at your desk anymore. It's in your pocket. People, and especially young people, are getting their news on their smartphones more and on their computers and TVs less. And especially when we're looking at a global audience, we're talking about audiences that may never even had that desk experience, never had the laptop experience. Their first exposure to digital news, in many cases, is on their smartphone. So we're seeing a big decline over the last decade in TV news, 33%, and we're seeing an 80% increase in the use of smartphones for news. Again, this all predates AI, but AI is going to accelerate this, and other technologies are as well. News is social. Now, this graph is interesting here. If you look at it, you see, we all know Facebook has ebbed and flowed. Right now, we're in a waning period of Facebook's influence on the news. It's still huge, but cumulatively across the fragmented media landscape, people are using social media for news 36% more over the past decade, and it's basically table stakes at this point. And news is visual, and it's consumed through for more entertaining, personalized, and informal settings. More and more people are turning to platforms like YouTube, like Instagram, like TikTok to get their news content, whether it's coming from news media providers or whether it's just coming from someone they know down the street. Users don't draw the bright line that we sometimes think of capital N news versus news from their consumers, from their communities. And so we really have to think about, how do we show up in all of these places that people are looking for information? So second big shift, how people feel about the news has changed. Again, I don't think this is going to be a surprise to any of you who've been around this for a while, but people are less interested in what they think of as hard news these days, and they tell us they enjoy it less. There's a huge decline in news across global markets, 63% in 2017 to 51% interest in 2022, self-reported. And there's been a 65% drop in enjoyment of news amongst those under 40 since 2015. These are sobering statistics, and unfortunately, I'm not seeing that this trend is going to stop anytime soon. So what can we do about it? We need to think in new ways to reach our audiences so that they're not just seeing us as faceless news. Because people are avoiding traditional news, and they're seeking that more entertaining and connecting content. The proportion who say that they avoid the news has increased globally since 2017. It's doubled in Brazil and the UK. People are looking for that more personalized content, that more visual content across social platforms potentially, that connects them to their interests and communities. People trust the news less, and they say it feels too negative. 29% of those surveyed globally avoid the news because they don't trust it. 43% say there's too much about politics and COVID-19. And globally, the 36% say the news has a negative impact on their mood. These are really sobering statistics. And so, again, we need to be aware of this, be responding to it in our products. And the third big shift about our audiences is who people want their news from has changed. Representation is increasingly important to news consumers. Around half of those surveyed believe that the media coverage is not inclusive in the US of immigrants, Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, and globally that perceived lack of diversity is a driver for consumers to abandon the news industry. They look elsewhere, they look to their trusted communities, they look outside of our publications. People don't think that traditional media has been delivering on diversity. 87% of US news consumers expect news media to provide diverse points of view, but it's not clear to most of them that that challenge has been met. And finally, in this step, people want to hear the news from human voices in addition to traditional news outlets. They're looking for trusted voices in their community, across those social platforms again, across those varied formats. They're looking for folks who provide different perspectives than what they hear from all of the traditional media sources. So those are the big shifts, and increasingly, these are the things that are being driven by young news consumers, and they're going to be accelerated by evolving technologies like AI and LLMs. Number one, they increasingly favor mobile, social, and visual formats. Number two, there's less trust and less enjoyment. And number three, they don't think traditional media is delivering on representation. But what hasn't changed? If there's all this change in technology, all this change in users' behaviors, what can we hold constant? Well, people's core information needs remain remarkably resilient. So Google conducted an open-ended survey in 2021 of tens of thousands of users, asking them to tell us about a time they recently watched, read, or listened to the news. We asked them to tell us where they encountered it, what they were doing, why they consumed the news, and what they were trying to get out of it, and what they did with that information after. We kept that really open-ended so we could collect a huge field of understanding of what people's experience of the news, as they defined it, not as we defined it, could be broadly understood. That first stage gave us raw materials to create a list of 46 individual jobs to be done based on what we had heard from those folks. We are not our users, and so we needed to go to them to get a sense of what they turn to the news from. We took those news jobs and we ran a second, more structured survey asking people to rank the importance of each job to them, how frequently they did those jobs, and the ease and difficulty of getting that job done with current news and information products. We took all that information and we were able to statistically collapse those jobs into 10 big job categories that describe the core underlying reasons people consume news across the globe. And I'd like to share those with you. So, first, stay in the know. And by the way, these are ranked in relative order of importance from our communities that they told us. These jobs are related to gaining well-rounded knowledge of news through topics, through current events, deep dives, differing perspectives. And the goal here for the user is they want to be a more informed individual. They want to know what's happening in the world. Secondly, they be prepared. These are the jobs that help me be an informed person to stay safe, to keep my family safe. They focus on weather, traffic, impactful events, and dangerous situations. Third, fight misinformation. These jobs are associated with fact-checking. These are people who want to make sure that they're not spreading misinformation. They want to make sure that they are aware of what is misleading that they are hearing. Fourth, connecting with others. These are jobs that are centered on having enough information on the news topics to carry on a conversation. The news learning isn't the goal. The goal is that social connection. The news is the means by which they connect with other people. Fifth, fulfilling civic duty. These are the jobs for people who really want to make sure that they are being an informed citizen, to vote, to participate in government, locally, maybe be aware of what's happening with their school board. Sixth, local jobs centered on social connection, updates on familiar neighborhoods, or making information to support decision making. We're going to come back to this one in a moment. Seventh, keep accountable. So these are the jobs that are allowing users to hold themselves accountable or to educate others or to get involved in causes they care about. Eighth, industry-related jobs that are about advancing professionally, getting information about careers, connecting with others on a professional basis. Ninth, investigating sources, jobs associated with finding and vetting news sources. Again, we're getting to the bottom here of the primary job. So this is a less frequent job, but lots of users still do, in addition to checking the facts, want to check where those facts are coming from. And last, pass the time. And again, we can see this one declining as time has gone on with the decreased interest in news as enjoyment, as entertainment. So those are the 10 big buckets of the jobs to be done for news that we think about as we're developing products. And I think this is something that you probably can see where, if you're from a news outlet, where your coverage, which buckets it might fit in, what users it might serve. And of course, these vary by market, which one is more prominent, which one is less prominent, as do the specifics. But this gives us a shared language to talk about our news consumers and understanding their deeper needs that we can design for. So I just want to talk about two specific jobs. Zoom in on local for a minute. We think local news is one of the core places where there is just tremendous opportunity and need for the platforms to help. That's why we made a big announcement yesterday about our support for local news in the US. So I want to talk about two specific jobs for local news consumers. First is connecting locally. So again, just to zoom in on this one a little bit, local news consumers want to know what's happening in their local area so they can feel connected to their community, so they can talk about it, and so they can make an informed decision. They want to know about events. They want to know what's happening in their local area, and they want to keep appraised of what's happening in other local areas. So we often think of local news as my hometown paper, but people actually have affinities to multiple locations. People want to know what's happening where their parents live, where their friends live. And good news products, good news platforms can help users fulfill those needs. And that's definitely something we're thinking a lot about. The other big job in the local space that we think about a lot is be prepared. So being prepared means those locally grounded events and information that help you feel safe and be safe in your community, knowing about weather or traffic so you can prepare, knowing what's happening so you can avoid dangerous situations, prepare for the impact if there are dangerous situations. Getting current updates so you can stay up to date on those dangerous situations if they're occurring, and knowing what's happening nearby so you can protect your loved ones. Now, we, in the local space, do a lot of research. Our user experience research team is incredible, and it's wonderful to get a very detailed sense of what people are interested in. So recently, we conducted a research technique called a max diff survey in some local communities to understand what are the top information needs of the folks in local communities. So this is a study where we ask users to directly rank against each other all these different topics, and across thousands of users, we're able to make some statistical significance out of that. So this is not to say that anything on this list is unimportant to users, but the highest value stuff in the local market that users are telling us they really want to see front and center is, so unsurprisingly, is top stories, it's weather, it's crime, and we'll come back to that one in a second. But also a lot of the stuff that we might think of as more soft news, the restaurants and food and drink, the events and things to do, human interest. Sports is an interesting one. So sports obviously drives local coverage, but it's incredibly polarizing. You end up with some folks who love it. It's their top thing, but you end up with a lot of folks who are like, do not show me any sports. I don't want that. And so it's really important to make sure you have a good understanding of the specific audiences that you are serving, so you know whether you should put sports front and center or whether you should put it on the back page or not cover it at all. And like I said, crime is one that I think everyone struggles with, because obviously we don't want to amplify crime unnecessarily. We want to make sure that crime is well covered, but proportionally covered, respectfully covered. And we hear this from our users. So when we've done user research here, we hear from folks. Two participants from a recent research study, one from White Plains, told us locally you can follow the police stations and they send out tweets that yesterday at my daughter's high school there was a boy and he started to follow their car of two girls, and it was posted to a Facebook group. And this was shared as something that they needed to know, they wanted to know. Knowing this helped that person feel safe. Whereas another participant from Detroit told us a possible downside from seeing too much about crime in your area, I'd want to know the headlines, just the most pertinent stuff, but not all the crime in the area. And that focus on staying safe, of understanding what's happening in your community so you can protect your loved ones, is the through line we see here. But again, All of these interests are nuanced, and they require editorial, and I would argue human judgment to understand what is going to be relevant to your audience. I would come back to focus on the user, and all else will follow. If you can better understand your users in your community, in the markets you serve, and if you can truly understand their needs and deliver for them, that is how we are going to continue in the face of technology change to deliver news products that help save and serve a community. Because again, new technologies are great, but the most important thing is that they give us new ways to serve more people. Thank you.